Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
There you go.
Yep.
We are getting a little more time on Facebook because of what's going on. So, but the same warnings apply when the thing is on. Don't say anything you don't want other people to see. But there are a few more people watching now, so good. All right, welcome to First Universalist of New Madison. The first day of the summer when it's actually sticky. So the doors are open, the fans are on. It's actually not too bad now. So, but if all of us remember when church was like this, when they didn't have air conditioning. So, and we still have fans in the pews for people that want to use it, courtesy of the local funeral home, which I always found an interesting touch. Good old Delbert, yeah. Well, he's not the only one. It's a rite of passage or a tradition, an American tradition. And I'm not exactly sure how that got started, but I'm sure they want to get their name in front of everybody, but it's not like everybody doesn't know who the funeral home in town is, so that was never a secret. The only secret now is the names keep changing so fast. The funeral home stays there, but it used to be they hyphenated whoever the previous owner that retired. Now they're just coming up with totally new names. That's basically a chain. It's one name, and then they're taking over funeral homes everywhere. Yeah. And part of that is because more and more people are doing cremation, and they're not actually using the funeral homes for funerals. And I've run across in the last couple of years people that don't even have one of the girls that was staying in one of my places that overdosed and died. They never even had a service. The funeral home announced that they had her remains and listed the parents and that kind of thing, and said service will be announced, and it was never announced. So which is kind of sad because she had lots of friends and lots of people. The funeral is not for the person who died. They don't care anymore. The funeral is for the family and the friends, and primarily maybe the friends who want to come and remember that person. So it's another sign of the times, what we call the atomization, when people are farther and farther apart and they get together on Facebook or some other type thing on the internet and don't really have any face-to-face communication. So we may talk about that eventually too. Do we have any announcements? No announcements, okay. I got such positive reviews last week because people like to hear good news. So we're going to talk about how news gets to be news, which it's not really bad, but it's not really good either. And then next week we'll be back to bad news again. So
that'll be easy to find.
What's that?
That will be easy to find.
Yes. Well, that's the problem. It is so ubiquitous And it is so important. The bad news that next week we're going to talk about insects. Remember, we've talked before about when you used to drive down the road when you were kids, there were bug splatters all over the windshield, and you had to stop, and they even had those little air deflectors on the front of semis and cars to blow the air up and keep the bugs off. There's no bugs on the windshield anymore. And it turns out that this is a universal, a worldwide phenomenon, and the what they call the biomass, the number of insects is dropping radically, and particularly in the last 30 or 40 years. And that is going to have ramifications which are truly frightening when you think about, the biomass. The bugs are what feeds the bottom chain, and if the bottom falls out, then we're kind of getting into this already. The birds, how many birds have you seen? You used to see flocks of robins, flocks of blackbirds, even flocks of sparrows would be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them in the trees. Used to complain because the sparrows would drop bird droppings all over your yard. You'd go out and bang pots and pans or shoot at them with a BB gun. You see that anymore? I mean, I don't. I hardly even see any birds at all. I put my bird feeders out this year. No birds. I'm not getting any birds, maybe just one or two. Used to have finches, goldfinches, canaries. Used to always be robins there. Used to be blue jays there. Not even seeing blue jays. The only thing that comes in my bird feeders is squirrels. So I kind of took the bird feeders down because I don't really enjoy feeding squirrels. So whatever, we'll kind of talk about that next week. Our prelude, almost like being in love. And I forgot, I do have two announcements. Flag Day, there's a Flag Day demonstration at the Circle in Greenville, if anybody is interested in that. And there will be one in Eaton at the courthouse in Eaton on the square there. Usually I go to Greenville. These are protests. These are like No Kings type protests if you're interested. Usually I go to Greenville, but since I'm more involved in Preble County, I'll be going to Eaton today. So theirs starts at 1, so I'll have to leave here by noon. So drink coffee and eat donuts quick. I found something different. I don't know if you can give me your opinion on donuts. If you like the donuts we've been getting, I actually bought a cake type thing. You can look at it and see afterwards. If you want a little more variety, I'm going to start bringing a variety. Just let me know what you prefer. The other thing is Friday, Katie Kohler Wagner was at the library for 2 or 3 hours to talk to people. I think there was a few people came in to talk to her, and I stopped and talked to her. I'm actually thinking about doing that too, even though District 40 is in Preble County. I'm thinking about doing it even up here because some people work here or drive through here or around here. So I'll let you know if we get that arranged. But anyway, I invited Katie to come speak to us if she would like to sometime. I said, you're not going to get a big crowd, but it's up to you if you're interested in it. And that invitation is all open to any political candidate who wants to speak. We don't care what party or no party. Actually, it's pretty much open to anybody who wants to make a presentation. We are an open and affirming congregation and invite anybody who has a message that they would like to share, as long as it is an appropriate message. Politics is not barred from church. Church is a place for education, a place how to learn what's going on, and political speakers are more than welcome to come and share what their vision is for the future and why they want us to vote for it. So just let that be known. All right, chalice lighting. We arrive together here by Andrew Polka. We arrive together here, travelers on life's journey, seekers of meaning, of love, of healing, of justice, and of truth. The journey is long, and joy and woe accompany us at every step. None of us is born that does not die. None feels pleasure that does not also feel pain. The tear has not yet dried on the cheek, but the lips curve sweetly in a smile. Numerous are our origins, our paths, and our destinations. And yet, happily, our ways have joined together here today. Spirit of life, source of love, may our joining be a blessing. May it bring comfort to those who are in pain. May it bring hope to those who despair. May it bring peace to those who tremble in fear. May it bring wisdom and guidance for our journeys, and through this joining may be for just a moment in time. The moment is all we can ever be certain of. May we embrace this and every instant of our lives. Our opening hymn is number 12, O Life That Maketh All Things New. Words by Samuel Longfellow, 1819 to 1892. The language is changing. It is evolving as we go along. And usually I read these. That's going to be a little complicated, so I'm going to skip reading that one. All right, affirmation. prayer of meditation for renewal by Rebecca Savage, one of my favorite Unitarian authors. Spirit of life, both within and around us, be present to our collective yearning for the renewal in this moment. Life has become super lifey these days, with the demands and pressures of jobs and roles, the tugs of the heart of people and places we miss and long for, the ways that when so much is asked of us, we crumble just a little bit more each day under the weight of it all. With soul-crushing, devastating news and updates from around the world and in our own communities, the loved ones in our lives hurting and struggling, the ways that we are hurting and struggling. Spirit of life, we pause to acknowledge the many challenges of life and send love and care within and out in the world. We pause to honor and hold space for the struggles we experience in our bodies and in our spirits, and we send our love and our care to those tender places. We pause to receive the abundant mystery and grace, the power of love that is greater than ourselves to heal and nourish us. We call upon all the transcendent gifts of renewal to be bestowed upon us for an energizing renewal to fill us in all the ways that serve our lagging spirits when our own resilience wanes. We give thanks and gratitude for the sweetness of renewal so that it may linger in us, be amplified and multiplied toward the healing and wholeness. In the name of all that is hopeful and holy, may it be so. You want to flip the camera around again, Kenny?
Oh,
Thank you.
missed that.
Not a problem. Joys and concerns. As usual, we will light our first candle for those who are missing. Has anybody talked to Chaz and Paula lately? We need to, I guess I need to call her or send an email or something and see if she would like a visit. We keep talking about that, but it never happens, and here we are, the summer's already going through. Tomorrow's June 15th. If you file your quarterly taxes, tomorrow's the day that's due. Just another reminder. And all the other people we've not heard from either. I'm starting to hear from some other people. The BE family, there's Chris and Emerson, and who's the third? She was one of the girls was at the meeting with Katie, and she said she never comes. She told me which one she was, and I have a terrible memory. So I would Carol, might be Carol. Carol. She said she watches occasionally. So hi, Carol, if you're watching. But I asked her, if you're watching, send a comment once in a while so we know who's there, or if you have any questions. Particularly if you have a request for something you'd like to hear discussed, please give us that. Right. Israel, how many of you heard about the discovery when the Israelis released a part of Gaza, and so the Palestinians could go back to it, the hospital? They found mass graves, over 400 bodies buried at the hospital. The Israelis said they were all people that died in the earlier bombings at the hospital, and the hospital buried them. But many of the bodies had their hands tied. Many of them were shot at close range in the head. So these were not bodies that the Palestinians brought up. These were bodies that were created later than that. No one has proof, but the UN is once again labeling this as a genocide. These stories, they're just coming on and on and on. Every side, and I know this is true, every side uses creative, basically, work to make their side look good and the other side look bad. So anything you hear as news has to be taken with a grain of salt. You have to investigate, get multiple, and this is what we call critical thinking. Get multiple sources, multiple backups, and review the sources that they're coming from. This report was filmed by the BBC and reported by the UN, who has their own investigators, so I tend to lend credence to what they're saying. One more example of the atrocities that are happening basically on both sides, but primarily the side we are concerned about is the side that says we are the only democracy in the Middle East. We are the reason that you give us money to support us. We do not want to be aligned with that kind of activity. Right, Ukraine, still no resolution. Doesn't look like there's any resolution, but I keep hearing more and more information on the news. Ukraine is striking farther and farther and deeper into Russia. They are hitting in St. Petersburg. They're hitting oil storage areas. They're not bombing civilians like the Russians are in Ukraine, but they are making the Russian civilians aware of what is happening. This is no longer a war that takes place out of sight and out of mind. It is now something that they can see the smoke clouds rising in their towns. Also, the casualty figures, everybody kind of watches there and try to protect their casualty figures. But the casualty figures are becoming astronomical on the Russian side. And that also is going to affect how Russia progresses with the war. All right, so once again, we pray every day for peace. Tornadoes, floods, the standard weather problems in the United States. We talked about the National Forest Service. All of their research labs have been eliminated. The dismantling that's going on, and basically the government services are being dismantled from one end to another. It is almost unbelievable what is happening. We'll talk about this next week, but I'll throw it out now. You've heard about the screwworm fly infestation in Texas, now in New Mexico. It is spreading. There's more than 6 cases. The reason that is there is when DOGE started cutting plans and policies and money that was being spent, there was a giant interception plan in Guatemala and southern Mexico to intercept the fly and release the sterile flies that kills, or doesn't kill. What it does is the sterile flies breed with the female screwworm flies, and then they're sterile and don't lay any eggs. That program was eliminated. And that was eliminated, and now they're trying to blame Biden for that. It wasn't eliminated until 2024. And the flies are already moving north. And they say now they are going to start the program again, and they are going to start, they actually reduced the program in southern United States. They released millions and millions of sterile flies. They cut that program by 2/3 or 3/4. Now they are going to open up a new breeding facility to breed more sterile flies. It will take a year before they start releasing the flies. So the screwworm, and if you remember, maybe you don't, if you were a farmer, when I was a child, when I was a kid, when we dehorned or castrated or anything, we had a fly spray that we sprayed on any open flesh because we had screwworm flies all over the United States when we were kids. That was all eliminated by the sterile fly breeding program. Science, once again, saved our butts. And science, when you kick it to the curb and pay no attention to it and do wild cuts with no sense. So, and actually, now that I'm thinking of wild cuts with no sense, let's light a candle for the cage fight today. Hopefully nobody is seriously hurt on the front grounds of the White House as 2 men, or maybe women or whatever, go into a cage and beat each other to a pulp. Nothing to say about that. All right. Anything from the peanut gallery?
Just a little concern. I mean, we read in the paper a few weeks ago about basically the controversy of removing benches in downtown Greenville.
Yes.
And I know we talked about that, but I think that just so illustrates that it takes a community to address problems. Addressing a problem doesn't result in the removal of benches. A simple fix rarely works. And I'm sure it's been tried in the past, but I guess my expressed concern is that as a community, maybe agencies can come together, perhaps they already have, but it's a multiple problem why people are homeless. And it's not simply because they're loitering around downtown and interfering with businesses. We understand business concern, but at the same time, removing park benches will not solve the problem. So I'm hoping for community agencies to come together, more comprehensive solution to that problem. It'll never go away. Perhaps can be stabilized.
And that is the red state solution, is you don't eliminate homelessness, you just push it where you can't see it. Many red states are now outlawing on camping on public property, like parks. They're telling the homeless they can't camp in public parks, they can't have their tents. Instead of putting in porta pots and having trash pickup and medical care, things that have been tried and have worked, but cost a little bit of money, it is the standard conservative response. Anytime there's something you don't like, you apply force to get rid of the problem. You don't cure the problem, you just apply force. They either do it your way or they get out of the way. And getting out of the way just pushes those people to someplace else. Many of them happen to be working for me now, so, which we'll talk about that sometime too. All right. One final candle for those thoughts and prayers, those fears, those worries that maybe we haven't recognized, maybe we haven't voiced, and for those that we would like to voice but just haven't worked up the courage. And also, we are open. Anybody who is watching and has, all you have to do is email us, text us. There's all kinds of contact things there. We are willing to help. We do not give out cash, but we give out information and support. All right, children's story. Oh, here's my first. Being a good person does not mean you have to put up with other people's crap. That is the whole point of demonstrations. Being a good person does not mean you have to put up with other people's crap. You can be respectful, but you can also stand up and voice your opinion. And I kind of ran into this. I was having a really hard time finding what kind of picture do you want to see that talks about goodness. There's really not. There's lots of Bible quotes about goodness, but not really very many pictures. Do you remember last week we had the children's story was the little bee, that the person was walking down the sidewalk and saw a bumblebee sitting on the sidewalk, and instead of stepping on it, she actually picked it up and took it home and fed it sugar water. It was a queen that had been kicked out of the hive, last year's queen. Her wings had been torn off. A lot of her fur had been torn off. But she lived with this lady for 12 days. This bumblebee, female bumblebee, would crawl up on her arms. She fed her sugar water. When she died, she buried her, and her life cycle was over. I mean, that was the end of her life anyway. But the last 12 days was a connection between an insect and a human being. And so I got to thinking about that. Opossums, people think they're dirty, they're terrible animals, they're afraid of them because they hiss when you see them. Let me do the children's story first, and then we'll come back to that.
With their resilience. But wait, there's more. Opossums are nature's little sanitation crew. They eat ticks, insects, snails, and even small rodents, helping to keep our gardens and backyards pest-free. A single opossum can consume up to 5,000 ticks in a single season. And don't forget their prehensile tails. Unlike many mammals, opossums use their tails to grip and hold on to branches, giving them excellent climbing abilities. This, along with their opposable thumbs, makes them adept at navigating through trees. You've been lied to your whole life. Opossums don't actually play dead. When faced with danger, the opossum falls into an involuntary shock-like state, a survival tactic that's far from an act. These misunderstood marsupials, commonly found in North America, are unique in more ways than one. Opossums have a natural immunity to certain snake.
They're immune to snake bites, so they kill snakes.
Their resilience. But wait, there's more.
So they are, and there's more and more. I read all kinds of stories about people who found abandoned Boston kits and raised them as pets, and they can make good pets. All kinds of stories about people who found foxes abandoned and raised them as pets. The fox, they would even release it to the wild. and the fox would come back to their door and scratch at the door like a dog or a cat wanting to get in and have treats. The only thing I can tell you about keeping an opossum or a fox or even squirrels as pets is they have a pretty distinctive rank odor that goes with them. Even people keep, as you see, skunks and badgers as pets. My dad was a vet. He used to do surgeries on pet skunks where they could remove the scent glands. So they make actually pretty good pets, skunks do. I don't know what the natural service people in any state, I think it's kind of illegal to do that, to keep pets. My son, as a tree trimmer, when they would cut a tree down and the squirrel's nest would fall, he would bring the baby squirrels home and raise them and set them free. So I don't think anybody is going to complain if you do that to save a life, only if you start parading it around and make a spectacle of it. But anyway, coons, I found candy on sale at Rural King and brought it home and forgot to take it into the house. And when I park my truck in the garage, I don't roll the windows up. Coons got in my truck and ate a pound and a half of candy, which I don't mind losing the candy so much, but they crapped all over the inside of my truck. So the next day, I rolled my windows up and just left a little bit of ventilation area. They pulled the weather stripping off the window and got in anyway, and there wasn't anything to eat, so they just tore up all the paper and all the stuff that was in there, which is pretty hard to tell because I'm a pretty messy person in my truck anyway. So now I have to remember to roll the windows up all the way up. Otherwise, the coons will be in there. And like I said, they'll eat my bird food. They can be a real pest, but they are smart, they're intelligent, they know what to do and how to do it. And they are inquisitive. So it's not like 20 years ago I probably would have started shooting them, but I'm not going to do that now. I'm just going to roll my windows up. All right. So we were here first. We raise our babies too. We keep your ecosystem balanced. And that when we get into insects, that's where we'll start all the way up.
Look there.
All right. Luke 4:18, the Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free. Luke chapter 4, verse 18. Good news indeed. Good news is such an important topic, I thought we would give it a second week of observation. Last week we viewed examples of goodness and survived the apocalyptic attack on our body politic. There are two types of goodness. The first kind we observe daily, a daily interaction, ordinary interaction between people who don't know each other, but offer grace and forbearance without direction or instruction. They patiently wait while you gawk at some confusing item in the middle of the Walmart aisle with your cart blocking any passage. They don't bump into you. Occasionally, after a few minutes, they'll say, "Excuse me," but most people will just sit there and wait while you look at the prices and examine the different sizes and decide what you want to do. That is an example of goodness. When you got stopped at a four-way stop, both of you will end up gesturing for the other to go first. Then both of you will start to creep ahead. Then both of you will stop. Then both of you will wave somebody forward. Somebody will eventually go take the first step. Once again, goodness is there everywhere to be seen if you just recognize it. The second type of goodness is larger than life. National or international examples not directly observed, but relayed to by intermediaries called journalists. Not just the reporter, but the editor and ultimately the owner sets the tone for the stories that grace our commercial outlets. And you can see by the difference that the purchase of CBS by a billionaire friend of the president has made. The 60 Minutes was transformed in an instant from a guard dog to a lap dog, resulting in the termination or separation of multitude of staffers of CBS 60 Minutes program, and an observable degradation in the content and tone of the stories, much different from what journalism schools teach. I went to college with a guy named John McWethy. If you're aware of years and years ago, this would be back in the 70s. He was a Capitol Hill reporter for ABC TV News. He graduated from journalism school at Columbia University in New York and was hired immediately by ABC News in Washington, D.C. He used to send communications back to me on the backstory of how journalism actually worked, what he learned in journalism school. He wasn't teaching me, we were just chatting back and forth in the old days when you could still do that. But what he did was gather information, he confirmed the information, he cleared it with his editor, all before it appeared on the air for just a few minutes. A couple of minutes was all he was allotted on the air, but a ton of work went into that before he did that. It wasn't something that somebody just handed to him. It wasn't something that somebody made up. Journalists went through and basically determined what was true, what was not true, what was factual, what was not factual, and what was even, what was presenting the news, not the opinion page. Jack, unfortunately, was killed within a few years of that in a skiing accident out in California. He was one of those people that skied down into a tree and did not survive. Really a sad story, and I miss him every year, particularly at the reunions back at college every 5 years. All right, how many of you have seen the movie The Post about Katharine Graham and the Washington Post and the Pentagon Papers? As an old movie by Steven Spielberg, I highly recommend it. Meryl Streep played Katharine Graham. She inherited the ownership of the Washington Post when her husband died. When the Pentagon Papers came up, the government tried to basically bury that story. They intimidated, they threatened, they went to court. They did everything they could to keep the story of the Pentagon Papers from getting out. The Pentagon Papers were a story that an actual employee at the Pentagon released about the lies and the misinformation that went on in the Vietnam War. It was a tremendously important and interesting news story, but it was something the government did not want released. They put every kind of pressure possible on Katharine Graham, and she resisted and published the Pentagon Papers, with the result that public opinion turned against the Vietnam War. What is our example today? What is our example this time? Who bought the Washington Post when Katharine Graham died? Bezos bought the Washington Post. What was his first act during the last election, the last presidential election? He prevented the Washington Post opinion panel, who have always endorsed a candidate, not always Democrat, but always a candidate they figured was the best candidate. He stopped them from endorsing a candidate because he had money and investments that he wanted Trump to favor him with. So he has changed the tenor of the Washington Post. He has knuckled under to those, to the people, the government in power. We no longer have a free press telling us what the things the government doesn't want us to know. And it's not just the Washington Post. Billionaires are buying up all the media. Billionaires bought CBS News. Billionaires are buying Warner Brothers. Billionaires are going to be in charge of CNN. So what do you suppose is going to happen to CNN's reporting? Billionaires are after MSNBC. Billionaires now control most of the local newspapers. They are owned by conglomerates. It used to be every town had its own newspaper. Sometimes they were even a free newspaper that was an advertiser that still had important stories. You still will see that occasionally in the Register Herald in Eden, or in the Greenville paper had an article on the Advocate, had an article on removing the benches. The benches are removed because they do not want homeless people sitting on the bench or sleeping on the bench in the middle of the night when nobody's in town. The answer is not to find some place to help homeless people. The answer for them was to remove the benches so nobody could sit there. A lot of regular, normal people, old people like me who can't walk the entire length of Broadway without sitting down, really needed a place to sit down. The volunteers in Greenville have done a tremendous job. They plant flowers. The city does not plant all those flowers along Broadway. The volunteers do. Those benches made a nice place. It made it a small town gathering place. The answer is not to remove the benches. All right. So what are journalists taught about reporting the news? What drives the good news stories? The first thing they're taught, according to Jack, and I agree, timeliness and proximity, the when and where of news. The news is perishable. Old news is not news. It might be an opinion, it might be educational, but it's not news. The cycle time has grown or shrunk shorter and shorter. Growing up before computers and cell phones, the nightly news gathered stories of the day and displayed them at 5 p.m. while the family gathered for dinner. Newspapers interpreted the happenings of the previous day first thing in the morning. Because there were a limited number of sources, the general population always had a common denominator of discussion topics. It was not uncommon wherever you worked, wherever you recreated, when you went to church, somebody would say, "Did you see that story?" I still say, "Did you see that story?" But most people don't, because the news supply is so scattered. Journalists were expected to report on the news, or as they called the facts of the story, without exhibiting their personal bias. Bias was the territory of the opinion page, where opposing sides offered their interpretation for the public to study, listen, and make their own decisions. Proximity. The local impact drives local interest. Is the story something that people would care about? Does it affect their lives? The cost of eggs, the cost of gas, the cost of electricity. When newspapers and television stations are bought up by conglomerates, Channel 22, you'll notice in Dayton, now has the information is the same on every one of the, whatever the name of the company that owns that. Every one of those stations all across the country has the same person, the same commentator, not your local reporter, but a commentator from somewhere else telling you what the news is. Every one of those stations is exactly the same. Newspapers, the Palladium Item in Richmond used to be a local paper. Used to have its headquarters there, used to be published there, used to be printed there, used to be, all the information came from there. Now it's owned by Gannett, and it is basically 2 or 3 little articles or 2 or 3 paragraphs tucked into the Indianapolis Star information. It is the Indianapolis Star sent to Richmond with a thin veneer of information about Richmond. Nobody in Richmond, well, I can't say nobody, maybe they do have a stringer or somebody that would go to council meetings or police stations or whatever, but it's not like the days when the local reporter was always interested in what was going on and reported what was going on, which is a vicious cycle. When you don't have local news, you don't read the local paper. When you don't read the local paper, you don't pay for the local paper. The local paper makes less money, so somebody from out of state buys the local paper and uses it for a venue. The only thing the local paper is actually used for now is to publish legal notices, which is extremely expensive to publish a legal notice, which is an archaic thing from bygone past because nobody reads it anyway. If you're foreclosing on a house and the person doesn't live there anymore, you have to publish 3 times, 2 weeks apart, that to so-and-so, this house is being foreclosed on. If you want to make a remonstrance, you have to show up in court on this day. That person has gone to California or Mississippi. I mean, they're never going to read the local paper. But the people who own the local paper still have a finger in the governmental population. And to be honest, they need to have some way to make money. So I guess from the legal profession, they can pull it from them. But we are losing a tremendous insight into our local neighborhoods because we do not have those local outlets. Impact, how many people are affected? Prominence, who is involved? Are they celebrities? That's who the story is about, or are they recognized as someone of no consequence who none of us would care about? You always know that celebrities gather the interest. Everybody wants to know, even if they stub their toe or get a traffic accident or whatever. Whereas the regular people, we don't see anything about. The unusual and conflict, weirdness and struggle. When normal breaks down, and when the out of the ordinary springs up and grabs the attention of the crowd, the standard, and they've talked about it for years, the man bites the dog story. If it's unusual, it's news. It doesn't make it newsworthy, but it makes it interesting, and that's what people want to see. Conflict. Tension makes for compelling narratives. Danger to the reader will raise the attention level. Human interest, connecting on an emotional level, an emotional hook, will garner more interest in more readers and longer readers. A child, a dog, a pathetic situation, lost or alone, injured, any of these will attract more readers or more watchers. Why does human interest matter for media literacy? How do these criteria work together? How we as individuals mesh with other persons? There is this person, the writer that I was following through here, was talking about gratitude, which I found pretty confusing, but they used gratitude as a marker for integration into a society of friends, not acquaintances. If all of your gratitude is vicarious, you may be living your life entirely through others. You may be too strong. You may be losing your sense of self. I never was able to parse that, to figure out what this guy was talking about, and I'm offering it to you to see if you can understand it. If your gratitude never extends beyond your own blessings, your sense of self may be bounded by stone walls, sturdy but closed to shared joy. In that case, you may be experiencing only a slice of what gratitude can be. And what explains it to me, that's like bringing your favorite dish to a potluck dinner, but refusing to taste anything else. Gratitude for others' blessings turns a private meal into a banquet. That part is clear, that part I agree and I understand. Now we turn to the darker side of the daily news, which it tends to inspire fear. It's stories of tornadoes, stories of wrecks, stories of fires, stories of murderers being on the loose. That is something that increases stress and hormone levels. Regular exposure to cortisol, stress hormones in the body, has an impact on physical health as much as mental health. It causes blood pressure to jump. Therefore, if consuming negative news is terrible for your mental and physical health, does the opposite work? Is the reverse true? Several recent studies have proven that consuming good news positively impacts our mental and physical health. If you see good news, if you watch good news, if you look for good news, you will be healthier, according to science. As proof, last week we had positive comments on the good news story, so we're hearing good news again, and hopefully you are feeling more healthy. Let's look at the physical ramifications of goodness. Signs of goodness before you even exchange names, your nervous system is already reading the other person. A genuinely good person has open, relaxed body language. Their shoulders are not hunched up by their ears. They do not cross their arms tightly or angle their body away from you. Instead, they face you. Their posture is soft, and they seem at ease in their own skin. Pay attention to how you feel in these first few minutes. Do you feel like a prop in their story or like a person who matters? Genuinely good people have a quiet skill. They help you feel seen and heard, even in a short chat. We had a couple people who we called into ministry in Pleasant Hill. One of them was an amazing person, very calm, very supportive. When you talk to him, I'd never really put my finger on it until I read this little description. He was a natural pastor. He was like my wife. He was a carpenter. She was not a carpenter, but he was a lay person who was called into the ministry because of his gifts. He was much calmer and much more supportive than even Tara is. She's a little type A. She goes right to the problem, and she's very supportive, and she'll quote you scripture. But she's not a person that when you meet her, you just relax and think everything is fine. You're like watching which direction she's going. Bruce was the kind of person who you just felt relaxed in his presence, like that you could tell him anything, and he would hear you, listen to you, look at you, not criticize you, and not tell you what to do. And I'm sure all of you have met people like this through your lives. These are the people who are the natural pastors, the people who are the counselors, the people we should want to talk to. So, a good person does not need to be the center of every attraction. They avoid dominating the conversation and indeed look for balance. All right, I've got way too much more stuff here, so we'll add this in some other time. Comments, questions, preferences?
It'd be interesting to see how locally owned or actually chain news outlets, do they cultivate that within their journalists, a sense of responsibility for throwing in some good news now and then. I mean, might it be a corporate directive? I mean, it sounds very businesslike, or is it a part of their training? But even if it's a part of their training, it often can be counteracted by you're doing too much good news. So it's interesting to take on that from the corporate level. We know how Fox operates. We have an idea how CNN and others do, but it's interesting to see what really drives the, if you will, reporting news coverage that reflects goodness.
There is, and we've all recognized this, the degradation, this disintegration of morality in the American spirit. If you remember, Ted Turner is the person who founded CNN. When he founded CNN, people said, "Oh, you can't have news 24 hours a day. There's not enough news." Ted Turner believed in that, and he did it. And Ted Turner made a point of saying the news is objective. We look for the real facts of the story. We don't put a slant on it. It's only the guy from Australia who came in and said, and he did this in Britain first, he took British papers which were renowned for honesty and integrity and being upfront, and they've been sued multiple times for tapping the king's or the prince's phone numbers to try and get dirty information on people. They have no scruples whatsoever, and they run their newspapers like that, and you can see the papers that they own. The Wall Street Journal is trying to maintain the separation between, because he owns the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post. The New York Post is a tabloid like the English papers that prints lies and slander and everything else. The Wall Street Journal, the opinion page, has always been conservative. The news page, they are at least trying to maintain that sense of civility. But that, yeah, it has changed. It didn't used to be rich people used to buy the newspaper, but they had a loyalty to the idea of news. They knew what journalism was. That's out the window now. Now it's buy it, control it, and that's the reason we talk about the power the billionaires and now trillionaires have over the rest of us. When they buy the means of communication, that's where we find out what's going on. If we can't find out the truth, we are in serious trouble.
It's
right.
Interesting to see if you look at the social side and social news, if you will, or social media, and how they cover, so to speak. It's obviously self-initiated usually,
Yes.
but people are very quick to celebrate the good news through comments, at least what I see on Facebook. But there's also a tendency to see, even if it's expressing pleasure in good news, who is the victim and how dare they try to do that to you.
Yes.
That's put in there, interjected in it. And I'm sure there's scholarly studies in the schools of journalism that are going, how does one counteract that, or at least allow it not to basically dilute the strength, the advantage of good news.
There used to be a fairness doctrine when we were growing up watching the news, watching TV. If you let one person on, you had to give the opposite side. You had to give the opposite person the opposite side. Facebook, when it was purchased, it originally had a thing where if you put on things that were untrue or slanderous, they would still let you print it, but there would be a little thing at the bottom that said, this is not verified, or this is not true, or we can't prove this. That was eliminated when that site was purchased, and now it's a free-for-all. You can say whatever you want, and anybody can put any information. Misinformation, that's how the misinformation on the COVID vaccination spread, because previous to that, when people would say vaccinations don't work, or they cause COVID, or they kill people, Facebook would say, no, they don't. Now, they can say whatever they want. The only thing you can't say if you watch is the very left side of the politics is limited on what they can say, which is just another march down that lane. Anything else? Okay. So, if you have a topic you'd like to hear more about, like I say, next week will be insects. It'll be pretty depressing. So. Offering. Peace, the perfect word. If you have something to contribute, please do. I'm going to see about setting up a website for the church that has a little donation button on it. We're doing that with the campaign. They're educating me as we go along, so hopefully maybe we can get some contributions from outside. Our contributions go to support fish. The mission of the church is to help other people. We have more than enough money to pay our electric bill and our gas bill, but we are still, as a community servant we would like to be. All right. Extinguishing the chalice, well, no, closing hymn first. Number 25, God of the earth, sky, and sea. pretty hard to bring back. All right, extinguishing the chalice, a shared path. Let us leave this gathering not with the present pressure to be polished, but with the permission to be real, to say the awkward thing kindly, to reach out before the words are perfect, to risk being seen, like at the Circle in Greenville or the courthouse in Eaton, and in doing so, make space for others to be seen too. In a world that often asks us to curate and filter, may we remember truth is magnetic, and small acts of honesty can call a community into being. Carry this light with you, not in your hands, but in your words, in your invitations, in your willingness to begin. Our final picture, I'm going to swing the camera around again. Kenny? All right, this was a news story that was on, and I couldn't really find happy news stories about horses. This has a happy ending, but this is the middle of down by Trafalgar Square in London. If you know the mounted horse guards, the grenadiers in England ride the horses, there was a backfire or something spooked the horses. They threw their riders and ran through the middle of downtown London through all the traffics, and you can see on the silver, she actually hit something and is bleeding from the front. So they ran into cars, they ran over a couple of people, nobody was seriously hurt, and the soldiers were not seriously hurt, and the horses were corralled at the end of the run. But just, horses are prey animals, and they are prone to weird kind of spooky things that will, I may bring one of those things to show you for a children's story at some time. But they are still companions on this earth. All right, that finishes our service. We're going to hear Till There Was You for the postlude. We have cake and donuts and coffee. Katie's card. If you've looked at, we have a couple of these back there. Be good, do what is right. Appropriate for today. All right, that ends our service. We'll leave our candle lit for all the problems in the world and all the people who are suffering in the world and all the people that we would like to hear from. At least let us know how you're doing and if we can do anything to help you. All right.
Jim, while you still have the picture up there, we need to always thank the City of London and the Brits for keeping those crosswalks labeled "Look left. You see it in the picture, right?
Yes.
There's a reason for that.
Yes,
And
American
it's
tourists.
all over central London and lots of small towns as well. I think. But
Yes.
look left.
And when you're renting a car there, you have to remember that when you pull out onto the highway, which side you're supposed to be on. So,
Also mind the gap.
Mind the gap.
Yes. Thank you, Bob.
Mind the gap I think that's a traditional saying that it's not really necessary. I mean, the gap is not that big.
Well, the one, what was that one that was one of the deepest tube stations in London? That, where they still use the old lumber things and the elevators, you know, the doors were all made of crisscross lumber.
Yeah.
That one always, it must have been a bigger gap because they had, it played so often. In my first couple of trips over there, why do they keep saying mind the gap? What gap?
And
Fortunately, I didn't.
almost scares New York.
Fortunately, I didn't, fall in. They weren't, whatever, they couldn't not understand what the gap was. And those kids at that station. It's so
But
deep,
we don't
it's so deep.
say it right.
Right.
No, exactly.
You know, I mean, you just expect that people are going to know that.
Well, I think that's sort of indicative sometimes of the British attitude toward us.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
you're not always the most considerate. I didn't either.
I was going to ask you here, and you explained.
What a reflection on America. It's sort of goes right along with the department of
We play football.
war. Yeah.
And we get
And now we have the Department of War. So, you know, lines up like this.
we have race car drivers. I mean, and everybody just wasted the accidents.